what does he tell them? He tells them in the book of Dvarim that is reviewing to them that just a second. Yeah, he says he told me this. Just a second. Yeah, he basically is expecting from them the information, and he tells them that you should not be afraid. He told them before they left. He told them, "Don't be afraid." In Chumash Dvarim, verse 29, he says, "Do not be broken, and do not fear them. Hashem, your God, who goes before you, he shall make war for you, like everything he did for you in Egypt before your eyes." So clearly he tells them that there's going to be trouble, and you don't be in their troublemakers, but at the same time, don't be afraid because you have God fighting for you. So they're coming back and they say, "Oops, we are afraid." Anything wrong? He told them to find out what's going on, and they came back saying that this is exactly what's going on. So like I mentioned earlier, all the commentaries are trying to understand what exactly was the wrongdoing of the spies. Some say that the wrongdoing was that they drew a conclusion out of their report. Because when they came back and they described what they saw, then they said that we are not going to able to go up there. That's what they said. We're not going to be able to go up there. If you look in the verse, and it's on verse 31, they said, "Lo nuchal la'alot el ha'am." We are not going to be able to go up to the nation, ki chazak hu mimenu, because they are stronger than us. So some commentaries learn that what was the wrongdoing of the spies? The fact that they said, and they drew a conclusion. Moshe never told them the conclusion. He never told them, "Tell me whether we can go up to the land or not." Moshe just told them to bring a report, what is the land like? But the fact if we're going to go up or not go up, there wasn't a question. God promised them the land. He told them it's going to be a good land. So obviously they're going to go up and inherit it. They came back and said, "No, we're not going to be able." So some say this is the problem. But the truth is, if you look carefully at the verses, you see that itself was not a problem. Why? Because before they even said those words, before they even said that we're not going to be able to come up to the land, the two verses earlier, the Torah already writes that it was Kalev and Kalev ben Yefuna. He was the representative and the leader of the tribe, because as I said before, from every tribe they sent a representative. Kalev ben Yefuna was the representative and the leader of the tribe of Yehuda. So when they just said that the people are strong, the cities are fortified, says verse 30, Vayahas Kalev esaham. Kalev silenced the people. And he said, "We shall surely ascend and conquer it. We can surely do it." Who said we cannot do it? Did they say we cannot do it? Before verse 30, you don't see anything in their words that they say we cannot. They simply give the report. Then Kalev gets all agitated and all excited, and he says, "What are you talking about? We can do it." Following that, verse 31, then is when they say, no, we cannot. So it's clearly that in their words, just about reporting about the land, there was already some type of statement that Kalev felt necessary to shut him down right there and then. He said, oh, don't say you can't, because you can. He's getting all nervous. Why are you getting nervous? They are doing their job. So obviously you're going to tell me that Kalev already being with them for 40 days, figured out their conspiracy, and he knows already where they are heading to. But when you read the verses of the Chumash, of the story, the way it's written in the Torah, it seems that they simply delivered a report based on what they were asked to deliver. And they did a good job. To every question that Moshe asked them, they respond. Moshe is telling them how the people, and they said they're very strong people. And what do you think? Moshe, they did not know that they were strong people there. I can give you a simple proof that everybody knew what kind of people there is. You know what my proof is? It's not my proof. Commentaries tell us. A year earlier, 1 year and a couple of weeks earlier, they crossed the sea. You remember that, right? A week after the Exodus. And they sang the song. And in the song, they are praising God for this unbelievable miracle. And a part of the song reads, Namoigu kol yoshvei Knoan. All the inhabitants of Canaan became very frightened when they heard about our experience. Now, this is a slave group who were just redeemed from Egypt, and they're singing because they experienced a miracle, and they're already excited to say that they are so special and the miracle was so great that even the inhabitants of Canaan became afraid when they heard what the Jews had experienced. So you tell me, if they wouldn't have known about the nature of the people of Canaan, and they wouldn't have known that this is strong people, etc., would that been part of the praise? Would that been part of the song? Is that something to talk about and to make a special declaration that even the Canaanites were afraid of us? If they wouldn't have known about the Canaanites, and if the Canaanites wouldn't have been recognized as strong people, then it wouldn't add anything to the excitement and to the miraculous experience of the crossing of the sea. I don't know who you are. I don't know who got excited. The fact that they are being mentioned obviously proved that they all knew about Canaan. They knew what kind of people they were. So now Moses is sending them to bring back the report. So they come back and they validate what perhaps was even known before, that we are going to deal with a very powerful army, which perhaps that army is more powerful than all of us, and therefore we are naturally not going to be able to make it. You have to remember, they don't say we are not going up to Israel. But that would be an expression of revolt. They are saying we are not able to go up to Israel. Not able means that the way we consider the natural factors, the way we compare the army power, it's clearly that we are not able to do it. Listen, if you're relying on miracles, so then why did you send us all together? God could have said, guys, what are you going? There's no reason to spy. There's no purpose in the tour, because it's all going to work miraculously. And once it's going to work miraculously, so then who cares? A miracle is a miracle. But it wasn't in that way. It wasn't in that way, right? Clearly, they wasn't in that way. They were going to see the land, and after seeing it, they were going to pursue, what is the best way to figure it out, and that's what they were told. That's what they were meant. So this is the big question over here. What is the difficulty with the spies? And in some years we gave different insights. I want to discuss something which I began sharing with some of the community members last Shabbat in the afternoon. This goes back to a story which is written in the Torah right prior to the story of the spies. And this is obviously the story that we discussed last week, also the story of Miriam. We all know what happened to Miriam. Miriam was inflicted with leprosy. She spoke seemingly negatively against her brother Moshe, and she was punished with leprosy. This is the end of last week's Parasha. The story of the spies, which begins this week's Parasha. Rashi doesn't usually do it, except in a very few places. We don't find Rashi should ask, what is the connection from the beginning of this Parasha with the end of last Parasha? Once in a while he does it. And our Parsha is one of those exceptional places that Rashi wonders, why is the story of the spies written right after the story of Miriam? And you look at this question on Rashi, and you wonder, what do you mean why? I can tell you why. Because chronologically, the event of the spies took place right after the story of Miriam. If you want to know the dates, I can even give you the dates. I'm not going to go in now with all the calculations, but it's clearly by our sages that Miriam finished her 7 days, what is it called, seclusion, that she was outside of the camp due to her leprosy, to her tsaras. So our sages tell us the day she finished the 7-day period was the 28th of the month of Sivan, which is this coming week. The 28th of the month of Sivan, I believe, is Thursday. Okay? And then the following day, which is the 29th day of the month of Sivan, Moshe sent the spies. That's the day that they came and approached him, and he spoke to God, and God says, Pajalustal, Shlach lecha, if you want to go for yourself, and the spies went forward. So if you look in the story, it happened all exactly chronologically, one after another. Today was Miriam finished her sentence, and they picked themselves up, left the camp, and continued from the place called Chatzirot. They camped before, where Miriam's story took place, and now they arrived in Midbar Paran, the wilderness of Paran, and right there and then, Moshe sent the spies. So what is Rashi's question? Why is the story of Miriam coming right next to the story of, right prior to the story of the spies? Before I'm even giving you Rashi's answer, I want to understand the question. What bothered Rashi? What bothered Rashi? Why shouldn't they be next to each other? Why shouldn't they be next to each other? So the Rebbe says a very profound insight. He says that when you put those two stories next to each other, it seems that they were similar. And that puts the honor to Miriam questionable. Meaning to say, what did Miriam do for Moshe? Obviously, she spoke Lashon Hara, right? She spoke negatively about him. What did the spies do to the land of Israel? They spoke negatively about the land. So then you read those two stories and you say, aha, I know the connection of the two stories. Miriam spoke Lashon Hara and the spies spoke Lashon Hara. So therefore, they are mentioned next to each other. But obviously, everybody, even a child who knows the two stories, would never suspect to consider Miriam similar to the story of the spies, for a very simple reason. When Miriam was plagued with Tzaraat, everybody waited for her recovery. She didn't die from it. The whole camp said, yes, she might have done something wrong, but we are fully supportive of Miriam, and we will show her our honor and respect by waiting for an entire week until she recovers. After all, she only spoke about her brother, and everybody knew how much she loves her brother, how much she was devoted to her brother. From the beginning of time, still in Egypt, she was that sister who stood by the Nile River, awaiting the safety and the security of her little brother in the basket. She was a very good sister to Moshe, and she was a prophetess. So we're not talking that, she did something very bad. At the same time, relatively to her level, I guess, it was considered a negative activity, and she was punished. But God had to explain her even why she was punished. God said, you think that Moshe is just like you. Moshe is not like you. Moshe is much higher than you. Moshe is incomparable, greater than you in his relationship with me, God. The way I speak to him, the way I communicate with him, the way he prophesies, it's uncomparable to any level of prophecy. Moshe is on a whole different level, on a whole different reality when it comes to prophecy than any other prophet. As the verse says, I speak to him mouth to mouth. He doesn't slumber, he doesn't sleep. He remains strong in his physical position while I communicate with them. As Maimonides goes on in the laws of Yesodei Torah, and he explains in great detail what Moshe was and how wonderful and superior Moshe's prophecy is. So she wasn't aware on that level of prophecy. No. And after all, she spoke only about her own brother to another brother. So you understand that you wouldn't compare it to the story of the spies, which is what I consider to be wicked people, the way they spoke about the land. We're not going to be able to go up there, and created an entire drama and fear that the people said, let's go back to Egypt. God said, you're all punished, you're all going to die. So clearly, we know that the stories are very, very different stories. But still, the fact that they are next to each other may raise the question or the concern that they are connected to each other. And that's why Rashi wants to know, what is the comparison, what relationship, what parallel can we learn from the story of Miriam and the fact that the story of the spy? What is the parallel between these two stories? What comparison do we find in these two stories? So Rashi tells us, I will tell you what it is. You know what it is? The spies who had seen with their own eyes what Hashem did to Miriam should have taken a lesson how careful they should be in regard their speech. If Miriam, who only expressed some concern about the sister-in-law, because she felt her sister-in-law, Tzipporah, was kind of in a state of pain and stress, not having her husband next to her as much that she used to have and before Moses became a prophet. And yet, she was punished, Miriam, for discussing the story of Moshe, for talking about him. How much more so, they, the spies, should have learned from that story and also remain silent and keep to themselves with regard to the report of Israel. So Rashi says this is the parallel between what happened to Miriam and what happened with the spies, is the fact that the spies did not take no lesson from what happened to Miriam. But like I said before, this is a whole different story. What is the part of the story that Miriam's experience should have been teaching a lesson to the spies? Which part of the story? So here comes a beautiful, insight given again by the Rebbe, who explains something very special. He says like this: if you consider what Miriam did is really, as far as the so-called Lashon Hara per se is concerned, she didn't speak anything bad about her brother. No, she just didn't evaluated the brother properly. She didn't realize that the brother has certain values which other people don't have. So it was a so-called a lack in estimating who the brother is. So she didn't do the proper, exact, clear evaluation about Moshe, and in her mind, God speaks to me, God speaks to Aaron, and God speaks to Moshe. So we are all somehow similar in the same case, and there is absolute no reason for Moshe to leave his wife. That was her conclusion. So she didn't perceive Moshe's values properly. That is the issue with Miriam. But that's not the issue, because that's okay. Not everybody has the full understanding about somebody until God tells you who the other person is, especially if it's your brother. It's very difficult to look at your brother and say that he's so much superior than me, coming from the same parents, growing up in the same house, we were fighting and playing ball together, and suddenly he's like, whoa, completely superior. We can understand that it might be difficult for Miriam to appreciate. That wasn't the problem with Miriam. The problem with Miriam, the Rebbe says, in that she was inflicted with tzaras, is the fact that she went and discussed Moshe's situation. She discussed Zipporah's situation. She went into a discussion with her brother Aaron. Oh, me feel bad for Zipporah. What's going on? God speaks to him. What does he think? God speaks to us too. Is he the only one? Nebuch. She elaborated about an issue which has nothing to do with here. And if you feel bad for your sister-in-law, you know what you can do. You can go over to your own brother Moshe and ask him, Moshe, remember me, I'm your sister. Tell me, what's going on that you are kind of remaining separated from Zipporah? I overheard your wife kvetching that you are not home. And Moshe perhaps would have either give her an answer or an excuse or tell her it's not your issue. Whatever Moshe would respond. Why are you going to Aaron, another brother, and elaborating into a lengthy discussion about your sister-in-law? They're expanding on it. They're discussing it. They're making it into an issue is the issue with Miriam. And that's why she got here consequence of tsaras. It's not about the bad thing she said, because she really said nothing bad. It's the so-called gossiping, which gossiping can be in good things too. You talk a lot, you describe a lot, but you talk, and eventually, you know what it ends up? To become negative. Oh, what does he think? Only God speaks to him. Okay, that's how it starts. This was the issue with Miriam. A blowout of gossip about a simple situation, which either is not your business, and if you are concerned, go speak to your brother and try to find out what's going on. That is what the spies should have seen, the Rebbe says. When they came back, and me asked before, so what's wrong? They just gave a report. For sure, the report is great. But how do you give the report? In front of everyone, elaborating. Ooh, wah, did we see mighty people? Ooh, wah, did we see fortified cities? Ooh, you can't even imagine. You think fortified. Did we see the army power? This is unbelievable. That wasn't the plan. The plan was, you're going to go, give your report, and move on. Nobody even has to know that you were sent. I remember once I read a book, a biography about a certain individual. And that individual, before his death, wrote a book about his accomplishments in a certain army. Okay? His accomplishments that nobody knew till this point, his great accomplishments. And actually, there were great accomplishments. And he supported his accomplishments with facts, with proofs, no question that he did not lie. But obviously, some of his accomplishments, like many of the accomplishments come, sometimes they're not meant to be known to the public who did what and on which expense. This is secret service. You do your job, you accomplish what you did, no one knows, no one has to know. But this guy, I guess, at the end of his life was concerned, maybe no one will remember him. Maybe no one would ever appreciate what he had accomplished. So he wanted to leave for himself a legacy, a so-called a remembrance pillar. So he wrote a book. And I remember showing that book to somebody who tells me, I knew other people with similar accomplishments, and they are under the ground, buried, and nobody knows what they did. This is called a devoted soldier. If you, at the end of the day, still have interest to be remembered and to know what you did, and that expense, some people will maybe get embarrassed, or some messages will be, will be made about certain individuals, then ultimately you're not there. You sent as a spy, you have a report to give, just say in short what you saw, what you heard, and move on. The way they presented it for the entire people, and the way they elaborated about it and discussed it to the point that really people got nervous. And as you see in the Parasha, they said, let's go back to Egypt. This is the issue with the spies. And that issue, says Rashi, you are accountable for that issue. You know why? Because you should have known better. How would you know better? Because what happened that one day before you left? You remember Miriam? And what was the story of Miriam? Exactly the same story. Not what she said and how she said it, and the very fact that she elaborated about something which does not deserve elaboration. This is quietly. You go over to Moshe, said, Moshe, Zipporah misses you. Okay? Come home. And Moshe is going to tell you, listen, I wish I can, but I'm in a constant appointment with God who doesn't allow me to be home. Fine. We wouldn't know this story. Nobody would have known this story. And life would be okay. And the same thing with the spies. This is a fragile crowd. They came out of Egypt just a year ago. And with a mentality of slavery. And they are still not ready and don't know what to expect. No, everybody is talking about the expected, unexpected, unexpected, the expected. The last few days, it's a book called Unexpected or To Expect the Unexpected. I'm not sure. But this is, they didn't know what to expect. They didn't know what to expect. And because they didn't know what to expect, obviously they were nervous. And now when you're coming and you are, making a whole commotion about what you saw, even though sincerely you can say, I only gave the report. I'm not saying anything bad, right? I'm watching my mouth. But that report, in the presentation of the report and how you present it, that exactly is what you are guilty for, especially that you saw what happened to Miriam one day before you left, and she came back after a week of isolation. So Rashi tells us why is the Parasha of Miriam written next to the Parasha of the Meraglim. Which means, in other words, it means even deeper. Consider the following. Moshe, after the story of Miriam happened, Moshe is writing the scroll, right? Moshe is writing a scroll. And the Talmud tells us, and Rashi for sure follows the opinion in the Talmud in a few places, that the way Moshe wrote the original scroll of Torah was segment by segment, meaning he recorded the events, how they unfolded. Today, this and this happened, this and this was commanded, he wrote down the section. Later, something else happened, he wrote on a second section. Then they were all compiled together to make up the Torah scroll. The Talmud calls that Torah Megillah Nitna. The Torah was given into a bunch of individual scrolls, scroll by scroll, event by event. Now, imagine, Miriam finishes her isolation and they're starting to travel. Moshe finished the scroll. What happens the next day? And Moshe tells Hashem, they want spies, and Hashem tells them, go for it. He immediately records that event. Why is he rushing to record it? Wait, let's see how the story develops. He's recording this event right away after the story of Miriam, obviously keeping in mind that I want you spies who are making your journey now to Israel to remember what happened to Miriam. And that will protect you in bringing back the proper report. That will ensure that the way you report back wouldn't be in the way Miriam spoke about Moshe. It wouldn't be in a way of Lashon Hara. And that was Moshe's purpose. Moshe was ready to protect the spies. Moshe was even ready to protect the spies in a way that by putting it next to the story of Miriam, someone might err, make a mistake, and think that maybe the story of Miriam is similar to the story of the spies. It might even occur to your mind that there are similar Lashon Hara stories, but usually we are careful not to do it. Says Moshe, I will put it next to each other Miriam might be upset that somebody may make the mistake that there are similar situations, but you know what? Miriam is ready for someone to make that mistake in order that each person would not repeat that same mistake. She didn't want others to mistake the way she did. She didn't want others to err the way she did. So her story is being mentioned and recorded on the very same day in the same scroll in order for the spies to avoid a similar tragedy. And yet they had not taken a lesson. They came back and they spoke and they spoke. You see, always people speak about Lashon Hara, this Lashon Hara, that Lashon Hara. Sometimes it's not even Lashon Hara. It's not even anything bad. You may just deliver a simple report you were asked to deliver, but you're doing it in front of a group of people which it's not for them to hear about it, and it might weaken them in whatever they're involved in, then this is becoming Lashon Hara. This is what God is concerned about. How do you avoid such things? How should have the spies? They did not listen to Miriam, but after all, like I said before, the Ramban says, and everybody says, after all, they were asked to bring a report. What could have prevented them? What could have protected them, perhaps, to make sure that the report would be exactly how Hashem and Moshe wanted and expected the report to be? What is the solution? You know what the Rebbe says? The key solution is in the actual very word of the name of the Parasha. It's called Shlach. What does Shlach mean? Shlach means sent. Shlach comes from the word Shaliach. The spies had the opportunity to consider themselves shluchim. What is the advantage of being a shaliach than other types of representation? A shaliach ultimately does not represent himself. A shaliach ultimately represents the one who sent him, the Meshaleach. When you are on a mission as a shaliach, it means it's not me, it's not the way I evaluate the situation, it's not the way I see the situation, it's the way my Meshaleach, the one who sent me, wants me to look at it. Which means as follows. You ever heard about the Torah's prohibition called shochad, bribery? It says you shouldn't take any bribery because bribery will blind you. What does it mean bribery will blind you? What happens? Very simple. You can have your perspective on something, which is your honest perspective, the way you look at things, and then you look on that same thing, not the way you look on it, but the way other objectives or other situations fell into that situation, right? Somebody gave you a gift, and now you're not thinking on that your way. You are now blinded with an image of whatever scenario was presented to you. That's called bribery. You can be wise, you can be righteous, you can have your own opinion, but it's not anymore your own opinion. And the same thing is with going and to do something even for Moshe. You go and you have a plan. As long as you don't have an agenda, you see the situation as is. The moment you have an agenda, you see the situation as I want to see it. And this is exactly the concern with sending spies. If the spies would have gone and say, it's not about us. God promised the land of Israel to the children of Israel. The land is good. Flowing milk and honey is a description of the land that we already heard about in Egypt. Before we even came out of Egypt, we were already told that it's going to bring us to this beautiful, amazing land. That's not the issue. Is the issue? We just have a mission sent by someone like Moshe who wants us to utilize our own mind and to see what is the best way to go up, what is the best way to conquer it. Moshe tells them, bring some samples of fruit. And it says clearly that the reason for the sampling of the fruit was to create a further excitement in the people about going up to the land of Israel once they're going to see what kind of beautiful fruit the land of Israel represents and produces. So all what they were told is to follow instruction by somebody who sent them. Don't involve your own agenda. Be a shaliach, shlach lecha. Be someone who presents a higher hierarchy, a higher person who you are just representing. And even if I have to use my own mind in figuring out things, it's because that higher person wants me to consider my own mind. He wants me to do it. Moshe wants me to use my mind. That's why he sent me on that mission. He wants me to utilize my own qualities, my own powers. But obviously, there is where the story went wrong. They started to see themselves as self-standing individuals. We see, we understand, I preserve, I see this thing. Who is I? It's not about you. It's about the mission you were sent to. And obviously, when this happened, this is when things went wrong. And not only was it a downfall for that generation, but as we know, the Talmud tells us that the story happened in a day which will be declared for the rest of the generations historically as a day of weeping and crying, known as the night of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. Until today, we are still dealing with the consequences of that same story which happened then. So what is the lesson of this Parasha that we are learning tonight? Is two things. Number one, very practically speaking, is even if you are to share good information, valid information, information that perhaps you were even asked to present it, be careful about the surroundings when you present it. Don't add more than what you were asked to, and give it over to the person who asked you to do it. Other than that, as the Rambam says, by Maimonides rules, if you are speaking in front of a person's friends about how great that person is, you can imagine that eventually it's going to end up being some negative values, virtues that person has, even though your intention was really to speak about his goodness. But that's the nature of the beast, as they call it in English. The nature of the beast means when you elaborate and discuss something, it evolves, it develops into further conversations and discussions, which can end up and will end up not positive. And this is exactly what happened to Meraglim, just like it happened to Miriam, just like it can happen to all of us. And obviously, this is the lesson, a very important lesson. Number two, when we are sent on a mission, especially when somebody follows instructions by the Torah, by Moshe, by the Rebbe, you have to see yourself as a shaliach. I'm only a messenger. I'm only a representative. And even if I have to utilize my own mind and my own abilities, it's because he wants me to utilize my own abilities. It's not about me. I don't see the situation as myself. I see it as part of a mission. Shlach. And with that, we can hopefully protect ourselves from reaching situations like Miriam, like the spies, and obviously to avoid that which led to the situation of being in the desert stock for so many years. And till today, God always remembers the story, but rather to merit the coming of Mashiach. With that time is going to be no jealousy, no competition, and obviously all a good preparation for the coming of Mashiach is that we spoke about ensuring the conversations are being done proper. So this is the lesson of the Parsha. So I'm going to conclude again with the announcement. All those who are in class today, if you have friends, probably you saw it on WhatsApp, of the community WhatsApp, please send it to your friends too. We're going to have an email also. And this is about Monday night, same place, same time, 7:30 Monday night. We are going to have a very special program known as One People, One Heart, which you are going to hear some powerful insights from lessons from the Rebbe's life. As I said, the keynote speaker is Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who is the author of the book Towards a Meaningful Life. Some of you had the privilege to hear him before. He came to visit the community a few times, and you will enjoy it. Monday, June 7th, 7:30 p.m. And if you want to follow it, I can even give you the address of Zoom. It's going to be onepeople.oneheart.org. Onepeople.oneheart.org. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the evening. And like I mentioned before, we might take a break of classes for the next couple of weeks due to some weddings and other celebrations that I'm going to be out of town. And Rabbi Elisheva is starting camp. So we might be off to the month of June. We'll keep you updated, follow the emails and the WhatsApp. Good night. Laila Tov. Good to see everybody. All the best to you.
Laila Tov, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, for this class.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very much, as always. Anybody who travels out of town, have a safe trip. Travel safely, gone peacefully, and